Good morning to everyone, and welcome to our Friday talk of today. Today we'll have our ANH workshop number 33 with our special guest, Andres Mesa, with a special talk that is titled Global Energy Crisis, an Opportunity for Colombia. So those are the talks that we have for October. As mentioned before, today we'll have Andres Mesa with Global Energy Crisis, an Opportunity for Colombia. Next week, on October 14, we'll have our special guest, Dr. Brian Frost, with the talk, The Petroleum Prospectivity, Potential and Risk in the Ultra-Deepwater Colombia Basin. On October 21st, we'll have our workshop number 35 with a special guest, with our Dr. Karina Rodriguez from Searcher, with the update of seismic reprocessing into the Sinú San Jacinto onshore. And the last talk from October will be the talk by Dr. Carlos Molinares with the hard task of increasing production on a reserve in Colombia, enhanced oil recovery, exploration on offshore and onshore. And we'll have so far 4 different talks for November. We'll have November 4th, the structure, stratigraphy, and petroleum potential of the deep water of Colombia Basin, offshore northern Colombia, by our special guest is Stephen Leslie. On November 11th, we'll have our workshop number 38 with our special guests, John Munoz, Paula Arcila, and Fabián Gallego, with the structural styles within the Colombia-Caribbean offshore basin and the relationship with the thermogenic hydrocarbon evidences. Into November 18, we'll expect a potential talk by Excalibur Multiphysics about geothermal energy in Colombia. We'll have as well in November 25th, the workshop number 14, our special guest, Marta Vides Casado from INVEMAR, with the offshore Colombia, what type of biodiversity holds underneath. Those are different areas that we have presented through the year, with some of them focused into gas and condensate, mainly at the north, Sinú San Jacinto and lower Magdalena Valley. So we have identified different 30 areas, and in the talk, during the talk of today, we'll be sharing the link if you are interested in maybe watching or review any of the talks that we have presented during the year or maybe previous year. So we are quite glad to have today the talk by Andres Mesa. Andres Mesa is a Master of Science. He's a geologist from the National University of Colombia, graduated in 2005 with an MSc in Petroleum Geology from Royal Holloway of London in 2010. Andres is currently studying a Master in Science in Energy, Economic and Finance in the University of Aberdeen. He worked in HOCOL for 8 years in the Exploration Division, and since 2014 has been an independent consultant. During his career, he has engaged in numerous oil and gas exploration projects across Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and Mexico, and he has an extensive experience in technical subsurface analysis, advisory during bid rounds, disbursement and A&A processes, assets due diligence, portfolio risk assessment, and energy transition strategy. He has been based in London since 2019, advising companies and investors from the UK and Europe who are pursuing upstream projects in Latin America. Next week, as mentioned before, we'll have our ANH workshop number 34 with our special guest, Dr. Brian Frost, with the talk, The Petroleum Prospectivity, Potential and Risk in the Ultra-Deep Water of Colombia Basin. So I'd like to give the stage to Andres and you, all of the attendees, to enjoy the talk.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope that the screen is already there. Well, thanks to the NH for inviting me to participate in this series of talks. I'm sorry I'm not going to talk about rocks today. I hope I won't be expelled from the scientific community. I think we've all had the illusion about climbing a mountain and see the spectacular views from there. like in one of those, like the Tolima or Nevada Greece in Colombia. And I don't have a photo of myself when I gave it a try, but this is how I felt. Have you ever felt the not very pleasant state of not being able to breathe? You feel absolutely lack of energy. And the higher you climb, the more chances you have of running out of oxygen and suffer from hypoxia and even die. But this is the human body, and as an enclosed system, you can assess it and it works perfectly okay. Every organ works okay, but it clearly needs something from the exterior to properly work, and that is oxygen. This is our economic system, which it's a combination of capital and labor who exchanges products and services through money. And in classic economics, the production of this economic system is a function of capital and labor, and energy plays a minor role. But in reality, it needs energy to work, as well as our body. This is how society looked in ancient times. And 2000 years after, it didn't look, it looked pretty much the same. But just 80 years after, we reached the moon. How was that possible? We did not become geniuses. Without exception, all human development indexes have improved dramatically since the 18th century. And the reason is that during centuries previous to the Industrial Revolution, the energy sources were food, humans in the form of slaves, cattle, wind, and wood. And by trying to replace wood and the invention of the steam engine, we started to use coal, oil, and gas. And that brought to the society a gigantic amount of energy, condensed through millions of years of geological processes. Here we can see the energy density of several of those fuels compared to batteries or to human labor. These have a lot of energy inside them. Only nuclear and hydrogen provides with more energy density. What that does mean? Well, that instead of using people or cattle to perform certain types of work, we can use a gallon of gasoline and save energy from those humans. And those humans will be able to study more, to produce more, to create more, to dedicate to healthcare, to art, to education. And that energy surplus is what drove this development in our society, to a point that nowadays some people make a living from video games. This is because there is an energy surplus in the system. In our imperfect socioeconomic system, we spend energy from this system to produce energy. This is what is called the energy return on energy invested. So oil, coal, and gas, they produce around 70 times of units of energy per energy invested. Here, we have the pre-industrial levels of this EROI. So we cannot go back to those times. We will keep producing energy and delivering energy to this economic system to work as we know it. So energy is not part of the economy. Energy is the economy, and energy surplus is development. And money is just a way of exchange this energy. So what are the needs of this economic system? Well, we need to heat, to move or transport, and to power or produce electricity. This is the share of final energy use by sector. So for transportation, most of it is used by light vehicles, then heavy transport, aviation, shipping, and others. electricity, which is used as it covers 22% of the whole energy use in the world, is used mainly by residential and commercial, and then by the industry. And heating is used mainly by heavy industries like iron, steel, petrochemical, cement, paper, refinery. And the reason is that they require high levels of temperatures during their processes. And what are the energy sources for those needs? Well, oil, mainly for transportation, but also for heating. In transportation, we use as well gas and biofuels. For heating, we use coal, gas, and for electricity, we produce it through coal and gas again, hydro, nuclear, and lately increasing renewables. So 84% of the energy comes from fossil fuels. So after looking why do we need energy and how it is obtained and why do we need it as oxygen is needed for our body, why are we currently in an energy crisis? Well, because this economic system, as an open system, which needs energy from the biosphere, it produces waste. And the world has committed to implement measures to dramatically reduce this waste, which is CO2 emissions or greenhouse gases emissions. So the world has committed to do that by 2050, to reduce to levels to avoid a climate disaster. So there are supply constraints because we decided that we don't want coal, we don't want oil, we don't want gas, and because of the Fukushima disaster, we also don't want nuclear. And all of this is based on the expectation that by avoiding 90% of energy sources, we can rely on solar and wind, which seems impossible. So let's see how the energy supply has been constrained, first in the oil sector and then in the electricity sector. So for the oil and gas industry, a significant pressure from social organizations and investors has been rising every year. On top of that, oil and gas became not such a good business at all. During the oil boom, during the oil price boom, the industry started to spend too much on projects that were not the best. So returns from those projects started to decline to a point where investors said, okay, maybe we need to move away from this industry because it's risky, but it's not delivering the returns that we want. So then started a new era in the oil and gas industry, which is capital discipline, which has been running this business since the oil price crash in 2014. So since this 2014, capex has been decreasing and had maintained in very low levels compared to a decade ago. If we see private equity funds, they changed. They are now providing with money for green energy projects rather than for conventional energy. And if we put here banks are zero. They don't want to know about oil and gas. Even during the price recovery in the last couple of years, capex has been maintained low, so there is not enough money for projects. But companies have been focused on shareholder returns and buybacks. So that's why, for example, Ecopetrol delivered this year during the first quarter the same amount of money that they delivered last year, and that's happening across the industry. So companies are not reinvesting in new projects or not all the projects that are needed, but they are trying to deliver returns. There's also the desire of efficiency. So that produced that a lot of companies were acquired by others and merged to provide with efficiency in the system, in the industry. So here we can see the monthly deal account in the US and other countries. After the price crash, it increased a lot. We could see big moves like Oxy buying Apache or Chevron with Noble, Woodside with BHP. So there are fewer competitors in the system. And also the landscape changed. Why? Because a lot of IOCs started to set targets to decarbonize the business. Some of them are staying business as usual, but they will start to set those targets to reduce their carbon emissions. Some of them, especially European ones, they are diversifying and they're retreating from oil and gas. Some of them completely staying away from oil and gas, like Ørsted from Denmark. So there is a change, and some of them are moving away from the business. So in conclusion, the oil and gas sector has dramatically changed. It's now that there are less incentives to invest in long-term projects. So companies are looking for short-term cycle projects. There is less money, so only good projects get approval. There is consolidation, and some IOCs are retreating. They are not investing anymore in frontier basins. They are staying or divesting from countries where they don't want to stay in. So there is less competition in some countries. And cleaner projects are preferred. Why? Because they need to set some targets regarding scope 1, 2, and 3. So the system, the ecosystem in the oil and gas supply has changed, and it has constrained the supply of a lot of energy for the system. On the electricity side, what happened in Europe? Well, this is the electricity output, and this is time. It could be days or weeks or 1 month. And these are the sources of electricity. This is the demand. The demand change from day to day, from month to month, but it stays more or less the same. So what happened? This is the curve of the supply, and some of the sources are cheaper than others, and the expensive ones are, for example, peak gas, which is the one that replaces when there is not enough energy or not enough electricity produced by solar and wind. So what happened? That politically, the countries decided, okay, you know, we don't want any more nuclear, we don't want any more coal, which provide with forecasted electricity. Now we want to expand on solar and wind. And what happened? Okay, yes, they expanded solar and wind, but in this periods of time, when there is not enough wind blowing and when there is not enough sun on the sky, you have a lack of electricity, and demand is still the same. So what happened? This supply curve, it moves to the left because there is not enough production of electricity from renewables, and they depend on peak gas prices, which are much higher. And not only that, they depend on gas from Russia. So that's why the price increased. Demand is more or less the same, but they rely on an unreliable source of electricity. This is Germany electricity output from onshore wind. Germany has the third world largest installed capacity in onshore. 56 gigawatts of installed capacity. And this is the production during July this year. Look at these points here. They just generated 380 megawatts in these periods of time. So solar and wind are not there when they are needed. They need a backup, and the backup is usually gas. So that's why the supply in electricity was constrained, and that's why the prices increased in all countries except in maybe France, because they do not rely on wind and solar. They have a lot of nuclear, and keep with that. So there are supply constraints because we want to avoid 90% of the supply, and demand keeps growing. This is the energy demand of the world. This is COVID, when everything is stopped. Nobody was traveling, nobody was going to the offices, and still we demand a lot of energy. So there are supply constraints there, but the demand is the same. So what could you expect? Well, an energy crisis. And if there is a supply constraint, then the prices increases. And if the price of energy increases, you have recessions because everything else is affected by the prices of energy, whether it is fossil fuels, whether it is electricity. So now the politicians, they are whispering to the societies, you know, the end of abundance is probably over. There is no cheap electricity, there's no cheap energy, and we have to accept that we have to pay a lot to become cleaner. And that not only affects households, it affects the industry, the production. This is aluminum production, and this is the output in the last couple of months. And you can see that they are producing less because energy is too expensive. That's the reason. So they are producing less, and they're bringing less to the economy. So what about the future? This will stay the same. The economic system won't change. We need energy surplus. We need to deliver it to the economic system, and we will produce waste, and we need to manage that. Energy demand will increase. This is a chart showing the Human Development Index and the annual per capita electricity use. And low and mid-income countries like Colombia, they want to have a better standard of living, and that requires energy. And high-income countries, which already have a high standard of living, they won't let it go, and they demand a lot of energy to maintain it. Probably an excess of energy they demand. This is the demand of the energy forecast by 2050. As we can see here, energy demand will maybe flatten a little, but it could increase as well. This is the amount of electricity that will be required. A chunk of that will be produced by coal and gas. Inevitably, solar and wind won't replace that. There is a need of oil, there is a need of coal, there's a need of natural gas. And yes, other energy carriers will come to the system, but it won't be enough. Why? Because we demand more energy. This is the oil demand in several scenarios. Even in the Sustainable Development Scenario by the IEA, compared with no new approvals scenario, it means we need to deliver more oil. We need to deliver new discoveries. We need to produce more. There is no escape from that, even if demand will decrease. Gas demand, it will also increase. This is the forecast in 15 years, mostly driven by Asia Pacific. Why? Because they will replace coal for gas electricity. Here we can see the coal power plants across the board, and most of the electricity produced in China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia, and India, it comes from coal. A third of the total amount of CO2 produced per year comes from 12 countries that produce 92% of the electricity from coal around the world. And those countries will probably replace those coal power plants with gas, not with wind and solar. The USA changed several coal power plants to gas because of the excess of gas that they produced by fracking, and they were able to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions without committing to it. They didn't commit in the Kyoto Protocol, but they delivered it because of the change from coal to gas. So energy will be needed. but we need it to be reliable. That means it's there when needed. It can be stored, it can be transported. And that's the beauty of the fossil fuels. They can be stored, they can be transported. Electricity can't be stored. At the moment, there are not enough batteries development to store large amounts of electricity. That's not possible for now. It needs to be affordable, low cost. We can see now what happened when energy is expensive. Everything else is expensive. And it needs to be clean, low greenhouse gas emissions. So that's where the opportunity arises. Here we can see the demand of electricity in the developed world. They demand tons of electricity. And to comply with the energy trilemma, comply with clean, reliable, and affordable electricity, they will have to pay a lot for that. It won't be easy for them. On the contrary, countries like Colombia, we don't demand huge amounts of electricity, and we can produce more. Not only electricity, but energy in other forms. So there could potentially be not only an energy transition in terms of the energy sources, but also a regional transition to places where it is easier to obtain clean, reliable, and affordable energy. This is Colombia's energy context. This is how we spend energy. Compared with the developed world, with UK or Spain especially, because we have the same amount of population, we don't require large amounts of energy, obviously because we are not developed and because there are not enough industries. This is the amount of heat that we require. It's produced from oil and gas, some industries, and cooking. Electricity, we demand 75 terawatts per hour a year, which is already clean and reliable. This is very important. It's already clean and reliable. We don't really need to get rid of that and follow Europe example. And transport, this is where we consume the most by light vehicles and lorries. We do not have trains. So can we provide to the economic system, can we provide to the world with new and old energy carriers? I think, yes, we can provide. What we need for transportation: oil, electricity in the future, biofuels, synthetic fuels, and hydrogen. How the heating need will be complied with gas and coal, probably including carbon capture, hydrogen as well, and electricity. And from the electricity side, which covers the other two, transportation and heating, we need to remember that we need baseload electricity, and there is intermittent electricity. So gas and coal, probably with carbon capture, nuclear, small modular reactors, hydro, they are the ones that provide with this baseload electricity. And then solar and wind, yes, a lot of electricity can be produced from that, as well as geothermal, but not to depend on that, but to create an excess of electricity to offer to other industries that probably want to relocate. So can we step up as a country and offer energy to the world? I think, yes, we can. We can produce conventional fuels for transport and feedstock. We can provide with carbon capture solutions for hard-to-abate sectors that use gas and coal, and that where we keep using gas and coal. An excess of clean, cheap, and reliable electricity. Hydrogen for heating and transport. So yes, I think we can produce all of that. In the oil production, we are not the highest producers, but we are also not the lowest producers. We are comparable with other countries, like big producers in Africa. We produce almost the same amount as the UK, and more than any other countries in Europe, as well as Asia. So yes, we can provide oil. We provide stability. When we look in the whole Latin America, There are few countries that can provide stability and that are very welcome for third-party investors. You say, yeah, there's Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Brazil, Guyana, Trinidad, Tobago. But from all of them, Colombia is probably very high listed. This is a graph from IHS where Colombia is really in the top rank of countries that are welcoming to investors in the upstream sector. We need to keep that. What else can we offer from the oil and gas perspective? Short cycle projects. Yes, we have mature basins. We have infrastructure already built. We have different type of plays. And we can also offer ESG options. Scope 1, people don't need to flare gas. They can commercialize it. Scope 2, we can offer green electricity for projects. Scope 3, there are offset emission projects. Reforestation, we have the Amazon. Yes, we can offer that for the industry, which is what they are looking for. What else can we do? Data, advanced seismic reprocessing, quantitative interpretation. Geology hasn't changed that much in the last 20 years, but seismic data has. Technology in that area has changed a lot, and we can provide more of that. We can go to or assess deeper and shallower reservoirs in all the basins, and ANH and the Geological Service are doing tremendous works on that. Reevaluate all concepts as well. Those projects are perfect. Look at next door basins or basin edges. The south of Llanos Basin, the western foothills in eastern Cordillera are totally underexplored. The lower MAC, which provide with large amounts of gas resources and light oil. San Jacinto and Sinú, which are forgotten basins, and we can see that some companies are doing a great job here, and there's potential there. And nonetheless, the Caribbean offshore. We hear about the 2 discoveries. Hopefully they can come and provide with gas for the country. I think we need to free up data. More eyes equals more ideas, and more ideas benefit the country. If the data cost too much, then less people are able to see it, less people, or the same people will look at it. There are fewer competitors, yes. So why bid rounds? We can see that in the last 2 or 3 bid rounds, very few blocks received more than one offer. So there is no competition. The process, the PPAA that is currently established, offers a way to directly negotiate with the ANH. That's probably a good way, because if there is no competition, there is no purpose for the bid round. And the development of ultra-deep water. Namibia just untapped 10 billion barrels of oil equivalent at a water depth of 3 kilometers. We know the potential that we have in the Colombian basin, and over there, I think we need to untap those resources. In terms of electricity, as I said before, this is the electricity demand. The matrix is already clean and reliable, so we need to appreciate that. These are the gas power plants, most of them located to the north, because this is where the gas is. And what we can do is offer more electricity. Yes, there is potential in offshore wind. The offshore wind roadmap was launched by the previous government in 2022. There is a very serious report. The potential is there. The wind speed average, it's more promising than the one in the North Sea, but is not continuous. It will not be continuous 24/7. There will be times where there is not enough wind, so we cannot depend on wind as Europe did. Solar PV, yes, we have potential again in the north. we can create excess of electricity, probably and logically, to have more electricity, but also to produce hydrogen. Colombia launched the hydrogen roadmap in 2022. It is a very good report. It has all the targets. It has like the legal framework, what we need to do, how can we welcome investors. And again, the place will be the Caribbean coast. There are targets to produce 50 kilotons, yes, of blue hydrogen by 2030, if there is enough gas in the system, obviously. And we have a great location, geographical location for shipping routes and also aviation. So in the future, yes, we can provide to the world with this hydrogen, which is the only energy carrier that can be transported and stored. It has technological issues. It is still not there commercially, but it will probably. The legal framework, there is this energy transition law, there's tax incentives, the offshore wind roadmap. There were 3 successful auctions in the past 3 years for solar and wind projects. So there will be an excess of electricity that we can offer. There are six structured projects for offshore and wind, all ready for an auction. So that's important. In terms of geothermal, well, the classic geothermal project was a high-risk, low-return project. It has the risk of the subsurface, similar to oil and gas, let's say, but in a low-return business, which is selling electricity. But technology changed. Now it is approaching to using a heat fluid exchanger, and now we have a low-risk, low-return business, which is more attractive. So what we need, a legal framework, which was launched in 2022 as well. So for example, now oil and gas companies can apply to officially use geothermal resource within the acreage, which is really important. Carbon capture. Again, I think in the north, offering a legal framework and potentially a carbon market for heavy industries that produce CO2, not to be a burden on the current industries that are in Colombia, but to offer a system to offshore companies that want to relocate to areas that will offer a good system, good infrastructure. Probably we can start to clean a little bit more the gas power generation. If there is enough gas, we can produce blue hydrogen through carbon capture and storage. So it's more to welcome more industries rather than to say we need to reduce our emissions. And there's also the global green taxonomy that Colombia joined last year. And this is really important for investors that want green bonds or all these carbon emission offsets. This was really good because there are not many countries with that, and Colombia can offer now that. So the world, the energy, how we work, how we use energy, it will be the same. And in the future, what will happen is that some of them will stay and there will be more. So we will need oil, we will need hydrogen, we will need carbon capture, we will need geothermal, we will need more electricity. And I think we can offer that. And I just want to finish up with this country, which seems far away, like very different from us, but actually it's really similar. Egypt has more or less the same GDP than Colombia. They have double the population. They produce almost really similar amounts of oil. They have much more gas, but what I want to show is some examples of how they are now saying to the world, you know, we can provide you with energy. So in oil and gas, they had a large area in the deep sea waters for 10 years or 12 years. They drilled 10 exploratory wells, no commercial discovery, They were looking for Miocene turbidites, biogenic gas, which was, there were some discoveries here in Israel and Lebanon. They were looking for that, they didn't. They were, the reserves were declining since the late 2010s, 2000s. And they launched a bid round for deep water in 2013. ENI took a block there, which was this one, and they reprocessed it. And what happened? Yes, it was the same biogenic gas. They were looking for gas, but there was a new concept. It was not Miocene turbidites, but limestone buildups from lower and upper Cretaceous and Miocene. And voila, they discovered 30 TCFs in 2017. In 2015, Egypt started to be a net gas importer, but the result of that bid round in 2013 changed the map, and now they're gas exporters to Europe. But not only that, they established the Gulf of Suez Economic Zone. What are they offering here? Infrastructure, ports, and a legal and fiscal regime optimal to produce blue hydrogen, blue and green hydrogen, and green ammonia. They're expecting to sign $40 billion worth in contracts to produce that. They are also starting projects for CCS in depleted gas fields to produce biofuels, plastic, and polyethylene. So what they are offering, as I said, a legal tax framework, infrastructure, and energy. That's how they are selling themselves. We provide clean, reliable, and affordable energy. So again, can Colombia step up and offer itself as an energy hub? I think yes, we can. We can offer oil and gas for short cycle project plus a great offshore gas potential. We can provide with more clean, reliable, and cheap electricity, not depending on renewables, but to offer electricity to others. We can use this excess of renewable electricity to produce hydrogen. We can create a hub for carbon capture and offer a carbon market like the emissions trading system for hard-to-abate industries to say to them, you know, you want to relocate, come here. We can offer you all of that. We can offer off-grid electricity solutions for industries, and we can offer carbon bonds in the Amazon for emission offsets. All of these, there are steps taken by the government, there are projects, there are studies, the Geological Service, the ANH, and several others. This is not new, let's say, but we need to promote ourselves more as an energy hub, as a clean, reliable, and affordable energy hub. So the takeaway message is, this is Europe, this is the developed world. They are begging for energy, they are begging for oxygen, they are struggling, and we can offer more. Not to tell to these people, hey, you have to electrify because you need to save the world. No, not to do that. To welcome industries, to welcome high energy or high energy demanding industries that they will require to comply with clean, affordable, and reliable energy to produce the goods that we will consume in the future. So finally, energy surplus equals growth, and that equals opportunities. And energy, it's an opportunity for Colombia. So thank you very much.
Andres, thank you very much for this amazing presentation that put us in how energy works and how Colombia got a huge potential of becoming an energy hub, as you said. So I would like to invite any of the attendees, if you got any question for Andres, and we will read it gladly, and I'm quite sure that he will answer as well. So There is a question, meanwhile, that Álvaro Montoya Andrés is asking about, what about the petrochemical industry?
What about
into the terms, I reckon it was into the terms of the outlook that you presented at the beginning of maybe how the petrochemical industry is positioned into the heat demand.
Yes. I mean, the petrochemical industry will continue to be important. They are high energy demanding. I think there is currently a pilot project in the refinery in Cartagena to use hydrogen to use it as the fuel to heat those processes, and that industry will still be needed. We need to process all the products from oil and gas rather than gasoline or diesel or jet fuel. There are more that are produced from those refineries, and that as well it counts.
Okay, there is a comment and a question, an interesting question by Diego Fernando Ramos Acero. He says, thanks, Andres. It's a very interesting talk. As you mentioned, we have a lack of CAPEX since 2014. And there's the question. From your point of view and the European investors, do you think that we can see a barrel of oil above the $120?
Well, forecasting the oil price is really difficult. I think it could be, but nobody likes it. It doesn't benefit the industry because, as you can see now, if the price is too high, then everybody struggles, and politics and society will blame oil and gas industry. So it is better a more stable price, I think, around 80s, 90s, as it is right now. But probably the issue is that as the industry as a whole is not reinvesting in more projects as it should, probably they went too far to save money to return to shareholders. In the future, in the mid future, we might see again an imbalance in the supply side, and that would bring a higher price.
Okay, there is an interesting question here by Diego Costa, and he asks, how would you try to embrace all of the new trends of energy transition with the current government policies?
How could you embrace with current? Well, if we realize, all of us, that it's not about constraining supply, but to bring more to the system, that would be like the way to go forward, to move forward, to say we will need anyway, the world will need gas, and people will need it in your home country, and yes, we have to clean some processes from industries. We need to increase our supply from electricity from wind and solar and geothermal probably, but not constraining the supply to just depend on those. And so I'd say that it's not to follow European way. We can see that the disaster that is occurring right now, it's precisely because they shrunk the supply side. by saying we don't want more gas, more coal, more nuclear, and we will rely on wind and solar, which are not reliable. So we need to accept and to understand that, and through that, if we do that, then we can move forward.
Thank you, Andres. There is another question by Jorge Toro. He said, thanks, Dr. Mesa. Great informative and illustrative talk. Question, speaking about the solar energy, how to balance the need for energy supply and the limited technical performance, maximum at 30% effectiveness of the source of energy?
Yes, it's quite difficult, and that's really an interesting way of looking or putting into perspective the renewable sources, because let's say hydrogen, it's not efficient to use the electricity generated by an inefficient solar panel to produce an expensive and hard to transport energy carrier like hydrogen, probably to store it and then to produce electricity again from that hydrogen. That seems to be not efficient, not energy efficient, and probably the amount of energy that you will deliver to the system will be less than the one that you are spending. So I'm not sure about the numbers of solar. I know that it is not the best one to let's say to in the energy system, is not the most efficient, but it could provide with solutions for to decentralize the energy matrix, the electricity matrix. So some industries will require and can use it. Some small towns can use it to provide electricity to the system and to benefit from it, and decentralize a little bit the matrix.
Okay, and this is the last question that I really like. This question is quite interesting. Fabio Contreras says, thanks for all the full of insights presentation. Don't you see an opportunity for carbon capture storage somewhere else different than the north of Colombia? How do you see low enthalpy geothermal projects get into the jigsaw of the development of agriculture for Colombia scenario? There are a couple of questions there.
The first one, the carbon capture. Yeah, I put the finger on the north, because for carbon capture to work as a business, it needs a lot of emissions, and currently the emission sources are more related to gas power plants in the north. And if Colombia decides to produce hydrogen from wind and solar, it will be from the north as well, and that is green hydrogen. And blue hydrogen requires carbon capture. So all the facilities from green hydrogen can be used by the blue hydrogen produced, but in the north. So it seems like in that area, not because of any particular geology or subsurface constraint, but because of the market, because it's easier to provide with a complete infrastructure hub in the north than in the south. In the south or in the center, it is more difficult to propose a whole carbon market to make it commercially or to make it available commercially. And for the geothermal, the low enthalpy, yes, for sure, we can there are the resources are there. As I said, the technology, it's bringing new opportunities to provide with electricity or to generate electricity with lower temperatures. And when you do that, you not only produce electricity, but you also produce, you can provide with heat for the projects like the ones you said, like for agriculture. And that would bring us like more productivity in terms of production of or food production, as it is doing, for example, the Netherlands. The Netherlands it's like the second highest food exporter in the world, not because they are very big, but because they are very efficient with those kind of projects. So I think, yes, those geothermal plants, the new ones, they provide electricity, but also with heat for agriculture.
There is a last question. We had one by Manuel Rodriguez, but you already answered this question with the explanation that you already given. And the last question by Fabio Contreras is, what about emissions in Boyacá with acerías Paz del Río, for instance?
Yes, they are a good candidates to let's say to store carbon, to sequester carbon, but that's probably not enough to make it commercial. And I would say that it's not about saying to the industries that are already in Colombia, saying to them, oh, you have to spend a bunch of money to make you cleaner, but to offer solutions to welcome new industries. So a new one can be placed or can relocate to an area, a hub, where everything is set to provide with green electricity, to provide with, for example, hydrogen, and to provide with carbon capture and storage sites. So yes, there are industries that obviously, like the cement industry in Tolima, they produce emissions, but I see it more of creating a hub to welcome other industries to relocate to Colombia, rather than put a pressure on the existing ones.
Okay, Andres, thank you very much for this amazing talk, the ideas, the whole thing that you've presented, and the data. That because the data is the thing that at the end is the final argument. There could be different politics, there could be different thoughts, but at the end, this is science, and data is what driven science. So I would like to thank first from the ENH to Andres Mesa for this great talk. This will be uploaded into our ANH webpage next week. And remind to all of the attendees of today that next week we'll have our ANH workshop number 34 with our special guest, Dr. Brian Frost, with the petroleum prospectivity, potential and risk in the ultra deep water of Columbia Basin. So I would like to thank all of the attendees of today and see you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.